केवलं ज्ञानमूर्तिं द्वन्द्वातीतं गगनसदृशं तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकं नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वदी साक्षिभूतं भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि. I welcome you all with my love and respects. Temples, repository of spiritual truths. From the time immemorial, not only Hindus, not only the people who belong to the Rishi culture, all over the world, in all traditions, creating a space for divine has become part of our life. Not only in the Hindu tradition, any religion, any master, any cult, any group, first thing they do is creating a space for divine. Not only human beings, even animals, when they live together, some of the beautiful researches that nowadays they videograph, some of these beautiful researchers, they say even animals don't use a particular area for their eating or for their regular life. Particular area they allot only for rest. They don't use that space for anything else. All they do is only resting. Of course, they don't know anything called worship or prayer. That's the reason they use only for rest. If they know, they would have used for it. We don't know. In every tradition, creating a space for divine or creating a place in which they can relate with the divine has become a part of their culture, part of their life. Here, in these 3 series of discourses, I'll try to explore the science behind the Hindu temples, the idea behind the Hindu temples, why these structures are created. Especially if you travel in India, you can see such huge structures. The other day I was taken to a particular university by a professor. I met a Nobel laureate in San Jose. He was taking me around his university. The person who was accompanying me, another one person, he was explaining about the whole university. He was bragging a little too much about the whole structure. It's okay, you can be proud of your university, nothing wrong. But he made a statement. Nothing like this exists in India, or nothing like this exists in your country. I just smiled. Come to our villages. Every village of Tamil Nadu has got much bigger structure than this whole university, completely done in granite. Every village of Tamil Nadu will have much bigger structure in granite. Why? our ancestors have created such huge structures in every village. What is the need? What culturally, socially, spiritually we got from these huge structures? Why, first of all, they have created it? Before entering into the subject, I would like to mention a beautiful scientific study done by a doctor from Rudolph. He went and stayed in Amazon along with a group of tribes for 30 years, not 1 year. 30 years he stayed with them to do some research about their lifestyle. There's an important thing which I wanted all of you to know. The tribes, they believe by creating an image of a particular person and invoking that person's energy into the image, into the clay idol, they can heal that person or they can transmit any disease to that person. They believe in a phenomenon called transmitting disease or healing disease through a clay image. They create a clay image and invoke his energy into that image. Then they heal him through this image, or they transmit a particular disease to him, even death. These tribes, they believe this idea. This doctor wanted to understand, study about it. He goes there with all his equipments to do research, with his video camera, whatever, to do research, to analyze what is happening behind this whole phenomenon. Not 1 year or 2 years, 30 years he stays with them, does a research, and then he publishes a beautiful paper. 3 things mainly he says. He says, if he has observed 100 incidents, more than 98 became true. That's the first statement he makes. He observed, if he has observed 100, more than 98, the disease is transmitted, or the health is transmitted, or the death is transmitted. That's the first thing. Second thing he says, not only to human beings, even to the trees they are able to transmit. That's the second thing he says. They make a clay model of a particular tree, and just by infusing that energy through some vibrations, through some sounds, they make the tree wither and die, or a dead tree is brought back to life. Third thing, not only with the living human beings, even with the dead human beings they are able to play. A person who is dead, within 3 days they are able to bring them back, bring that person back to life. It's very mysterious and very strange. If you can get his book called Hidden Mysteries and read it. He gives enough of proof, evidence, and all his case studies and researches, whatever he has done in 30 years, he has published in a book called Hidden Mysteries. Finally, he comes to the conclusion. He gives the conclusion. This group of tribals, they are able to transmit disease or health or death through just clay image, even if the person is thousands of miles away. Even if the person is thousands of miles away. Second thing, not only to the persons, to the trees also, to the animals also. Third thing, not only with the living beings, even with the dead persons, they are able to play. They are able to bring dead persons back to life within 3 days, or they are able to talk to the dead persons for ever. They are able to relate continuously with that persons, even dead persons. When you look this phenomena, if you can relate with an ordinary person through an image, why not with a divine energy which has created the whole universe? Again and again people ask me, Swamiji, why are you worshipping idols in Hinduism? I tell them, no, in Hinduism there is no idol worship. We don't worship idols, we worship through idols. It is not idol worship, it is worship through idols. There is a very big difference between idol worship and worship through idols. We should understand, when you go and stand in front of idols, do you pray, "Oh stone, please give me boon"? "Oh statue, please give me, please heal me"? Do you pray to the statue? Do you pray to the idol? No. You say, "Oh Devi, please bless me. Oh Shiva, please heal me." We worship through idol, not the idol itself. There is a very big difference between worshipping through the idol and idol worship. Somehow this word idol worship and this idea is used just to condemn our way of life without understanding what is happening. The people who look the whole process superficially started condemning it. Just because they condemn, they also started believing it. Especially last 50 years, after this so-called Western scholars, when they started translating Vedas, when they started disrespecting our culture, Max Muller translated Vedas just to disrespect it, just to torture it, just to prove that there is nothing worth in it. He writes in his letter to his mother, "I have translated these books just to show them that they have nothing." With a deep disrespect, he translated. He just condemned. Yes, the very purpose for translation is just to condemn. Of course, once the Western scholars have done their job, the Eastern scholars have also picked up the same way of thinking, same trend, including Radhakrishnan, including Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, whom we respect as a great philosopher. Including him, they have started taking up the same way of thinking style, same trend of thinking, and started condemning our idol worship, our worship through idol, our way of life, our culture. In many places, they are not able to tolerate, they are not able to digest our way of life. So they give emphasis most to the Advaitic philosophy or the monistic philosophy, just to show to the people that we have something juice. The other things are non-essential. They don't understand the whole thing is essence. There is no such thing in our system. Only the Advaita is essence, philosophy is essence, and our culture is something less than Advaita, or which needs to be condemned or altered. There is no need. The whole thing is essence. Whatever we have from the first line to the last line, it is essence. There is nothing needs to be edited in our scriptures. There is nothing needs to be altered in our culture. There is nothing needs to be rearranged in our way of life. But somehow, because of these Western scholars, even the so-called Eastern scholars, including Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, they have started thinking, writing, preaching that we are degraded in cultural form. Our everyday life, our day-to-day life, our practical culture is away from our Shruti. It is not. Only thing, we have not understood. We have lost the connection between the Shruti and Smriti. We have lost the connection between our Upanishads and Agamas. We don't have persons who can relate and explain. Just because we don't have persons who can relate and explain, we can't say our Agamas are something less than Shruti. No way our culture, our practical philosophy, our day-to-day life is less than our Advaita Siddhanta or the backbone of our Indian tradition. We need to understand the day-to-day culture, the temple worship, the fire rituals, everything is a clear practical Vedanta. It is the essence of our wisdom. It is the juice of our Rishis' research reports. The person who creates a formula to reproduce the same experience which happens in the outer world is a scientist. For example, Newton saw apple falling from a tree and something happened in his consciousness. He created a law of gravity. He created few rules, regulations, understandings, formula to reproduce the same experience in other beings. He is a scientist. Person who creates a formula to reproduce the experience which happens in the outer world is a scientist. Person who creates formula to reproduce the experience which happens in the inner world is a mystic. Mystic or a saint is a person who creates a formula to reproduce the same experience which happens in the inner world. These temples, our rituals, puja, homa, all these things are formulas created by our rishis to reproduce the same experience which happened in their inner space. They have created a formula to reproduce the same experience in our being which happened in their inner space. When we don't understand, when we don't practice, we can't just say it is not true. Just because we don't have enough patience, just because we are not able to give enough time to work with these formulas, you can't say the very formula is wrong. You can't say the very root is something wrong. First thing we need to understand, worship through idols. It is not worshipping the idols itself. Next thing, why temples? Now I wanted to explain another experiment. It's a beautiful experiment done by a Japanese doctor. He has published a book also called Messages from Water, a beautiful book which has become very popular in the recent times, especially after the movie What the Bleep Do We Know. It's a beautiful movie which has become very popular. In that they speak about this experiment. His experiment. He has done a beautiful experiment. He takes 10 glasses of water, same type of glasses. 10 glasses he fills with water, keeps in 10 different rooms. He goes to one room and creates a positive, good vibrations by uttering words like a peace, silence, meditation, good words. he utters good words, creates a positive vibration. Then he goes to the next room, starts screaming, violence, terrorism, these are the words he shouts, creates a negative vibration. He goes to the third room, chants few words from Dhammapada, Buddhist scripture. Like this, he chants different words in different rooms. Then he freezes the water, sees them through microscope and photographs them. He comes out with amazing results. He says, the water which he energized through positive words, they shine like diamond. The photographs, in photographs they shine like a diamond. And the waters which he used, negative words, like a war, terrorism, all these negative words. He says, I don't know from where the color and darkness landed on them. They look dark like a devil. And almost like a devil pictures or the ideas are represented in those photographs. Not once or twice, more than 300 experiments he has done. And he says, water can just radiate, respond to your thoughts. Water can hold, radiate and respond to your thoughts. When a simple water can respond to our thoughts, our vibrations, why not a structure? Why not a temple? Why not a stone? It can become alive by our thoughts, with our emotions. Our masters have created so many methods, techniques to hold the positive energy so that the humanity can be helped by the positive energy. The methods or techniques which they created to hold that positive energy and radiate is what we call temples. They have created so many methods. They tried to install the energy in the earth element, in the stone. That is what is the idols, murtis. They have tried to install the same energy in the water. That is what is tirthas. That is why every Indian temple will have a tank or a river as a tirtha. Third, they try to install the same energy in the fire. Every Indian temple will have a lamp which is never switched off, which is never put off. Will have a lamp or a agni which will be continuously burning. And ultimately, the air. The very air of the temple is filled with the vibrations of mantras. The mantras, continuously when they are repeated, chanted, the very air vibrates with that pure vibrations. Above all, the space, ether. You can see the temple architecture. It is always created in a dome structure. Whether it is South Indian or North Indian, the dome structure. The dome structure is created to hold the ether. It's almost like a battery. They say if you can hold one lightning, if you can store one lightning in a battery, if you have some battery or method to store one lightning, you can supply electricity for any city more than a year. More than 1 year you can supply electricity for any city, any big city. Only thing, we don't have such a system or a method. We don't have the type of batteries. These temples are created just to hold enormous energy, so that when enlightened masters come, they will install their energy. All the Indian temples are installed by an enlightened master. It's like when a rich person dies, he leaves all his property through his will. to somebody, some of his, maybe for his sons or daughters or some relatives, he leaves all the properties. Same way, when an enlightened person leaves his body, he leaves all his tapas, all his punya, all his merits. Our masters have designed beautiful battery which can hold this energy and radiate it for thousands of years. Temples are the batteries in which they have stored their energy. Parani is installed by a great saint called Bohar. Tanjavur is installed by a great saint called Karura. Tiruvannamalai is installed by a great saint called Idaikada. So every temple, of course Madurai, Shiva himself came down in the name of a Siddha. The name itself is Siddha. Shiva himself came down, Sachokanada, and he installed his own energy. Every temple is installed by an enlightened master. They have created a beautiful battery in which they can store their energy, where their energy can stay and radiate and help millions of people for thousands of years. It is because of that concentrated energy in Garbhamandir, your prayers become reality. You should understand one thing, how our prayers become reality. How our prayers comes to real life, how they become reality. If you keep a slide in front of a projector light, you will see that slide in screen as a reality. If you keep a temple slide, you will see the temple. If you keep an actor's slide, you will see that actor. If you keep an actor's slide, you will see that actors. Whatever you keep in front of a projector light, you will see that in reality. Same way, whatever thought you keep in front of a concentrated energy, you will see that that thought will become reality. The Garbhamandirs of temples are a high intense energy, potential energy which is created by an enlightened master and maintained by a regular puja and mantras. Continuous repetition of mantras charges the whole energy, the whole space. It is kept alive. When you go and stand in front of that energy field, when you offer your thoughts, simply the whole thing becomes a reality. For example, if you are continuously repeating a particular thought strongly again and again, you will see your body and mind, everything will be directed towards that thought. Same way, when you go and stand in front of a energized murti, in front of an energy space in the temple, and create a thought, create a wish, your whole body and mind will be tuned to that thought. Naturally, it will become reality in your life. In the temples, two things will happen. First thing, you will have the Shakti to make your dreams into reality. Next thing, you will have the Buddhi to realize what you think as reality itself is a dream. Shakti to make your dreams into reality, Buddhi to realize the reality itself is a dream. Both happens when you are in energy space. Temples are created to replace an enlightened master's presence. Enlightened masters, when they leave the planet Earth, when they leave their body, they wanted there should be some space which can continuously inspire the people, which can continuously heal, inspire, which can give them the experience of spirituality, or the sacred feeling. That is the reason they have created these structures. And you should understand the energizing process. It's a beautiful sloka in Taittiriya Upanishad. They say, from Akasha came the Vayu, from Vayu came the Agni, Agnir Apa Prithvi, Prithipyor Annam. From Agni came the water, from water came the earth, from earth the other things continued. Same way, the energy is also brought. First thing, the energy exists beyond the ether, beyond the space as Atman, Atma Shakti. Through the visualization or through meditation, the energy is brought to the Akash Shakti, the space. From there, through verbalization, through mantras, it is brought to the air. Through the chanting of mantras, it is brought to the air. From there, through the fire rituals, through homas, it is brought to the fire. From there, it is brought to the kumbha, the water. From there, it is brought and installed in Bimba, the idol. That is the way the energy is brought and installed inside the statue or the idol, inside the murti, inside the vigraha. When the energy is installed inside the vigraha, you can't call that as a statue, it becomes a deity. There's a big difference between idol and deity. In Vaishnavism, we call it Archavatara. Different incarnations of God. God has taken a different incarnations. He took the incarnation of Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Parsurama, Kalki, so many incarnations. Same way, he takes the incarnation of Vigraha, Archavatara, to receive the worship and prayers of devotees. Once the energy is installed, once the prana pratishtha is done, once the energizing is done, it cannot be called anymore as idol. It is Archavatara. We call it as incarnation of God. The divine descended in the form of idol, Vigraha. They say in a beautiful way, the Brahmanda expresses itself in Pindanda through the idols. The cosmic energy radiates itself, makes itself available to us through these idols, through these vigrahas, through these statues. We need to understand how it is possible and how we can derive benefit from it. Even Einstein says there is no such thing as a matter and energy separately exists. We don't have a clear-cut boundary between matter and energy. After Einstein, the very idea matter and energy has disappeared, because he says whatever is energy. When he says E equal to mc square, whatever exists is energy. That is what the Upanishad says there. Last statement of science is E equal to mc square. Whatever is energy. The first statement of Upanishad is Ishavasyam idam sarvam. Whatever exists is energy. So the last statement of the science is the first statement of Upanishads. Whatever exists is energy. When whatever exists is energy, why not? We'll be able to relate to that energy through these idols. Idols are the windows through which you can see the vast empty sky, through which you can see the whole sky. Sky is the Brahmanda. Idols are the windows through which you can see the Brahmanda. You can relate with the Brahmanda. For example, if suddenly some tsunami or some natural calamity happens, all of us have lost our cell phones except one person. Only one person has got one cell phone. If he says that I can speak through this small thing to the other part of the world, will you believe? No, we won't. We will not believe if he claims I can speak to anybody who is in the other part of the world just with this small instrument. First thing, you will not be able to believe. Second thing, if he proves that he is able to talk, he will become a great saint. We will start worshipping him, respecting him. That's the same thing happened in our Eastern culture also. Temples are cell phones. In those days, everyone was able to relate. Today, the tsunami of Western civilization has entered and destroyed the whole thing. Tsunami of the cultural invasion happened and destroyed the whole thing. Now only few are able to operate that cell phone. First thing, the younger generation, they are not ready to believe the cell phone works. Next thing, if at all you see some proof, you make him a saint and you say, oh, it is such a big job, very difficult job, he is able to do, he is a great saint, an enlightened person. But I tell you, cell phone works and it is very easy. Not only it works, it is very easy. It is for common man. It is for common public. It is for all of us. Just because we lost few keys, we can't say this lock can never be opened. Just because we lost few techniques, we can't say our ancestors are fools for building these huge structures. They are not as we think. Surely they are much more intelligent than us. Understand, the society with TV is surely much sophisticated, much more cultured than the society without TV. Because now they have more comforts. Of course, more choice among the miseries. More choice among the miseries. Anyhow, they have at least more choice. There are more options. How a society which has got TV is more sophisticated than the society which doesn't have? Same way, actually the TV, cell phone, refrigerator, all these things are created by a much more sophisticated, intelligent society. Same way, our temples are developed, designed by a highly cultured, intelligent society. Only thing, now we lost the technique or method to use them for our day-to-day life, for our everyday life. Just because we lost few keys, we can't say the original system itself is useless. It is much more important than any other comfort, any other outwardly thing. It is much more basic need for our life than anything else. That is why, if you see the Indian villages, it will be very funny. The houses will be done, the ordinary mud and ordinary material, but the temples will be constructed with granite stone. If you go to every village of India, the costliest structure of that village will be temple. The costliest structure of the village will be temple. If you, in some villages, if you sell the whole village also, it will be much less than the cost of the temple. Even if you sell the whole village, you will not get that much money which they have spent for the temple. Our ancestors, they know the importance. This is the place where the culture is alive, where you can relate with others. This is the space in which you can rejuvenate yourself. Next, temples have played major role keeping the social structure alive. Somebody asked, Swamiji, why do you Hindus continuously waste all your wealth in constructing temples, building these huge structures? I told him, India is alive. Hindus are alive as a group of people, as a community, as a country, just because of these temples. It is temples which kept our whole culture alive, which kept our whole structure alive. Even if a Manu comes down, Manu is the person, is the creator of our laws. The Manu Smriti is the first book which says what we should do and what we should not do. Our do's and don'ts are clearly explained by Manu in his Manu Smriti. If a Manu suddenly comes down to the planet Earth, starts walking in the Indian villages, surely he will not find much difference. He may find little extra, the TV, the refrigerator, all these things extra. But the core life, the main thread of the lifestyle is same. It is alive, it is preserved, it is still there. More than 10,000 years of recorded history. We have more than 10,000 years of recorded history. In the modern day, the societies, civilizations, which are just few hundred years old, are shaking. The younger generation is questioning the elders. All the rules are questioned. So much of rebels, so much of confusion, so much of depression. But this society, which has got more than 10,000 years of recorded history, is still alive. The roots are same. And I wanted to mention one more thing. There is no country or culture which has not invaded India. And there is no country or culture which is invaded by India. There is no culture or country which has not invaded India or Hinduism. And there is no culture or country which is invaded by India or Hinduism. But still, this culture is alive. The country is alive. Again and again, our temples are broken, destroyed. But again and again, it stands in a much more beautiful way. Vishwanath temple is destroyed more than 14 times. Somnath Mandir is destroyed more than 70 times. 70, please understand, not 70, 70. Only Ghajini Muhammad destroyed 17 times. More than 70 times it is destroyed. All major temples of India is destroyed at least 10 times. At least 10 times it is destroyed. But again and again it stands up. How? And the funny thing, if you see, the king who built the temple, his palace is demolished. His palace is no more, but the temple stands. It is standing. The person who built the Tanjavur temple, the Rajaraja's palace is no more. There is no palace. but the temple is alive. I am sure the same architect, same Sthapati only would have built both. The same Sthapati only would have built the temple and the palace. But the palace is not there. Temples are standing. Temples are surviving. How? Because they are something more than physical structure. Temples are like a satellite relay centers where the high intense spiritual energy is created, where the high intense spiritual vibrations are created and sent to all over the world to help the human beings to heal them physically, mentally, emotionally, above all, spiritually. It is we who is supposed to take the responsibility. It is we who is supposed to learn how to tune ourselves into that higher energy, how to relate with that higher energy, how to derive the benefit from that higher energy. It is we who is supposed to discover the key, how to unlock this lock and experience the inner treasures. It is we who should know the contact number to activate this cell phone. Meditation is what I call is the key to unlock this door and experience the inner treasure. Meditation is what I call is the number through which you can activate and relate with this higher energy. Meditation is the master key to relate with the energy which is in the form of Murti, which is available to us in the form of deity. That's the only way we can open the window of idol and see the Brahmanda. We can open the window of deity and see the cosmic energy, experience it and have all the physical, mental, emotional and spiritual benefit. Tomorrow we will see practical technique to tune ourselves into this cosmic energy. How the religion is relevant to spirituality. How the day-to-day practices of religion can be made into spirituality. When we do it with awareness, any ritual can become meditation technique. When we do it without awareness, even a meditation technique can become a ritual. How we make spirituality into religion, how we should make religion into spirituality. Tomorrow we will see the subject, religion and spirituality, and a practical technique to tune ourselves into this cosmic energy which is installed in the deities through our ancestors, through these mantras, through these pujas, through this worship, through all these great rituals by our ancestors and spiritual masters. Thank you. What time is supposed to end? Okay. If you have time, we'll spend a few minutes. I always tell people, let us analyze these concepts. Now I expressed a few concepts and ideas. You can analyze it through your question. See, only when we analyze these concepts through our questions, we will be able to internalize it. Usually by listening, we will never internalize. Tell you honestly, we have an automatic filtering mechanism in our system. Whatever doesn't suit with your logic is filtered automatically. You don't let the ideas into your system at all. Only when it is acceptable by your logic, you allow it inside. When you find something goes above your head, you just stop. Automatically you censor it. Now whatever ideas you have censored, you can analyze it by your question, so that you will be able to internalize it. You will be able to digest it. Anywhere you are not able to accept or understand, you can raise your questions, so that we will be able to internalize these concepts. You are welcome with any question.
Anybody has a question?
Yes. Use the mic, please use the mic.
You mentioned that when you worship at a temple, your thoughts become reality because of the energy. I was curious about, we do go through positive and negative thoughts. So I have a question with regard to that. Is it appropriate at the temple?
It's an important question. Surely you must avoid negative thoughts inside energy space. You are playing with fire. I think something higher than fire. The energy, when it becomes more subtle, the positive effect and negative effect, both are serious. Please understand, with stone if you play, the positive effect also is less, negative effect also is less. With water, it's little more, positive and negative both. With fire, it is little more sensitive. With air, little more sensitive. With ether, it is much more. With electricity, it is too much. If you use it properly, it can help you in all possible ways. If you abuse it, it can simply destroy the whole life. Not only our life, all our property. So be careful. We are playing much more powerful energy than electricity in our temples. So you must be careful to have only positive thoughts. Not only positive thoughts, you should have only clear thoughts. You should not give power to self-contradicting thoughts. Please understand, when you pray, always pray, let me be healed. Never pray, let me get rid of this disease. When you use the word, let me get rid of this disease, you are creating a self-contradicting thought. When you repeat a word, let me get rid of this disease, you give power to the word disease also. When you repeat a word disease, you automatically think about the disease. So by now, you already given power to that word also. Understand? Repeat only the positive words. Repeat only the words which are straight. That is why beautifully we have this Chamaka mantra, Sanchame, Mayaschame, Priyanchame, Anugamaschame. All these words are positive engrams. Let me have food, let me have sleep, let me have bed, let me have house, let me have cows, let me have wife. This is the meaning of the Chamaka. See, these words are all positive engrams, straight words. They don't have any self-contradicting words. This Chamaka and all these things, they teach us how to have straight words. That is the reason. Even if you don't understand, better use our ancient mantras to pray. Because they are very clearly structured. They are already clearly structured. When you use your own words, you may create self-contradicting words. When you say a word, let me get rid of this disease, you will be giving power to the disease. If you say, let me get rid of this habit, you will be giving power to that habit. I have never seen anybody quitting smoking by continuously repeating, let me quit smoking, let me quit smoking. No, he can't. Because when you utter the word smoking, you already given power to it. It's like in Ramayana, beautiful character, Vali. Vali has got a boon. Anybody comes and faces him, he will have half of the power of that person. If you go and stand in front of him and face him, half of your power will go away to Vali, go away to him. Same way, your engrams. If you give power to the self-contradicting samskaras, self-contradicting sankalpas, it will be creating only more trouble for you. So you should be aware of the sankalpas which you are making. You should be aware of the sankalpas to which you are giving power. So let the sankalpas be completely positive and a straight line. Let it not be a self-contradicting sankalpas. Please understand, these are the few basic important things which we need to understand, which we need to practice in our life, not only in the temple, not only in the energy space, even in our regular life. Next.
I have myself a question. I think, when we look back India and also so many thousands of years back, we see that the people had the faith, and the faith was the kind of a starting point to be able to do the things that you're talking about, meditation, devotion, slokas, and all those things. Then it leads us to the key that you're talking about to unlock all the wonders, the divine. So I have the feeling that the faith is going down. That's one thing. The second thing I would like you to address is, how do you really instill this faith right from the end?
First thing, your idea, the starting point is faith in ancient days is wrong. When our kids are initiated into Gayatri, you should know the meaning of the mantra, Gayatri mantra. It says, let me meditate on the energy which awakens intelligence in me. Let that energy help me to meditate on it. Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Saviturvarenya Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhyo Yona Prachodaya. Understand, this whole statement, nowhere you hear anything about faith in that technique. Only when he starts experiencing that technique, then he starts believing, or you can say, once you experience, afterwards what happens to you can't be called as belief, it's a trust. He develops trust, then he is given the Ishta mantra. Please understand, in all other group of religions, in all other religions, you are baptized, given faith. You are asked to believe in some concepts, like a teaspoon feeding. Here, no faith is required. Hinduism is the only religion which doesn't ask faith as a prerequisite, which we need to understand. Please understand, Hinduism doesn't demand faith or belief as a prerequisite. When we initiate our kids into Gayatri, the meaning of the Gayatri is just, let me meditate on the energy which awakens my intelligence, that's all. You are not asked to meditate on a particular deity. You are not asked to believe that some deity exists somewhere. No. Nothing is told. You are just given these words which creates a kind of vibrations in you. You are asked to repeat it over. Naturally, person experiences the higher awareness and consciousness through this word. Once he experiences, only then he is given philosophy. The system, Gurukulam tradition is, at the age of 7 he is given Gayatri. Between 7 to 14 he will repeat the Gayatri. By the age of 14, if he achieves the Pratyagatma Chaitanya Jagrata, means the individual conscious awakening, the first experience, he will be asked to study Brahma Sutra and he will go for sannyas training. If he doesn't achieve that experience, he will be asked to study Kama Sutra and he will go for the Grihastha life. If a person who studies Brahma Sutra between 14 and 21, if he achieves the complete enlightenment, he will be given sannyas. If he doesn't achieve the complete enlightenment, then he has to study the Yoga Sutra. This is the way our structure is created. Hinduism doesn't demand faith. That's the first thing. It's a pure technique. When you start Gayatri, it's a technique to relate with that energy. It's a technique to relate with the cosmic energy. In the early morning, you are asked to repeat that word, repeat that mantra, to tune yourself to that higher energy. It's a simple technique. You don't need faith. You don't need belief. You don't need to believe somebody is sitting somewhere. You need to bow down to that person. No. You are not given any concept when you are initiated. Only after the first experience, after you experience with that mantra, with that first technique, then you start growing trust. When the trust happens to you, then you are given philosophy. Then you are given concepts. Even then, in Hinduism, we don't call philosophies as philosophies. We call it as darshana. Darshana cannot be translated as philosophy. Darshana, you can use a different word called philosia. What is experience is darshana. Philosophy is what is intellectually conceived. Darshana is what is experienced. So darshana is not philosophy. It's like understand two things. Philosophy is a kalpana, means imagination. The intellectual jugglery or intellectual gymnasium or a brain candy. That is what is philosophy. Darshana is visualization. It's like what exists but you don't know it exists. So darshana is the technique to tune yourself into it. The example for darshana is, in the daytime also stars exist, but you are not able to see because there is no sun. There is sun. There is sun. Because of sun, you are not able to see the stars. If you are taught there is stars in the sky in the daytime also, it is darshana. Which is truth, which you are not able to experience as on now. If you can tune yourself a little bit to it, you will be able to experience. If you have telescope or instruments which is needed, immediately you will start experiencing it. Darshana is the truth which exists. Only thing, you need to fall in tune with it. That is darshana. Philosophy is just imagination or playing with more and more words. Philosophy means anybody who can complicate simple things can become a philosopher. That is philosophy. Philosophy is just complicating a simple thing through the intellectual gymnasium, through words. Philosia, darshana, is giving you the tips, or giving you the methods to experience which exist but which you are not able to experience at present moment. So there is a very big difference between darshana and philosophy. All other religions feed their kids with philosophy. Hinduism feeds it with philosia. From the beginning, you are given only techniques to tune yourself into that ultimate reality. You are never asked to believe. So there is no need for faith, there is no need for belief in Sanatana Dharma. To experience Sanatana Dharma, you don't need faith, you don't need belief. All you need is the courage to explore, the courage to experience, the courage to gamble. That's what I say. All you need to experience Sanatana Dharma is courage to gamble. You need to have courage to enter into it and to see what it is. You don't need anything else. So there is no need to install faith, to install belief. And I tell you, all faith, all belief is only superstitious, skin deep. It's only skin deep. You know how much the skin is. What is the depth of the skin? All your belief, all your faith is just skin deep. All we need to give for our kids is only understanding, not belief. Try to give them more and more understanding why we do all these things. Why you are asked to bow down. Why you are asked to come to temples. Why you are asked to go around the deity. Why you are asked to do namaskar. Give them more understanding, not belief. If you try to give them more and more beliefs, either they will resist. By force, if you somehow manage to infuse, they will become idiots. Please don't do the mistake of giving them belief or faith. Give them intelligence, understanding. Give them more and more wisdom. That is the right